A king so paranoid he feared being poisoned in his own bed. A queen stripped of her jewels one day, then her head the next. And an exploding coffin leaking the rotting remains of one of history's most infamous rulers. These jewels saw it all. Love poisoned by betrayal. Paranoia turned into cruelty, and power corrupted beyond repair. Henry VIII's legendary treasures didn't just outlive his reign. They outlived his dignity. Over 3,690 pieces of precious metals and stones bore witness to psychological warfare that would make modern tyrants envious. From Anne Boleyn's cursed bee pendant to the mystical Three Brothers jewel he believed could detect poison, each piece carries the bloodstains of his victims and the madness of his final years. What secrets do they still hold? In this video, we will discover the dark truth hidden in their sparkle. A crown of love, jewels of a promising king. From the outset, Henry VIII's reign radiated promise, and nowhere was this more evident than in the jewels that crowned him as a young king. When he ascended the throne in 1509 at just 17, he embodied the Renaissance ideal. Venetian ambassadors described him as the handsomest prince in Christendom. Standing over 6 feet tall with striking auburn hair and an athletic build, Henry projected both charisma and vigor. At his coronation, he wore a golden crown and a collar encrusted with precious stones, carefully chosen to display his authority. Each jewel served a purpose beyond decoration. They were instruments of power, signaling his wealth and his divine right to rule. Early in his reign, Henry's collection reflected this golden image. He possessed traditional crowns, ceremonial chains, and religious pendants, all befitting a devout Catholic monarch. These pieces were not random ornaments. They were tools for projecting status and reinforcing the monarchy's image. One piece, in particular, stands out for both its craftsmanship and meaning. A heart-shaped pendant in gold and enamel, likely crafted around 1521, inscribed with the entwined initials H and K. The motto on this piece, plus toujours, meaning always, captured the spirit of his marriage to Katherine of Aragon. The design combined the Tudor rose with Catherine's pomegranate emblem, which symbolized fertility, and the two motifs grew from the same branch, a visual hope for a fruitful union and a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. This H and K pendant was more than a token of affection. It was a deliberate political statement, a public display of unity between England and Spain. Through such jewelry, Henry and Catherine presented their marriage as the foundation of national strength. Henry reinforced this image by showering Catherine with other lavish gifts, further establishing himself as a devoted husband and a generous ruler. In these early years, their marriage appeared secure, and the court learned that display meant power. Yet, even in its optimism, the H and K pendant hinted at the complexities of the Tudor court. Affection and loyalty could be pledged in gold, but such symbols could quickly shift in meaning. The pendant, once a sign of hope, became a relic of a love story that would unravel. As Henry's ambitions grew and his desires changed, even the most cherished jewels took on new roles and new owners. What began as a symbol of unity and promise would soon be overshadowed by other, more notorious tokens, each one marking a new chapter in the story of power, betrayal, and the ever-changing fortunes of the Tudor queens. B for betrayal. Anne Boleyn's fallen pearls. Anne Boleyn's bee necklace became one of the defining images of the Tudor court. Crafted as a gold letter pendant suspended from a long strand of pearls with 3-drop pearls, it boldly announced Anne's presence and status. In portraits, the necklace is inseparable from Anne's identity, an emblem of her ascent in a world where every jewel was a message. Wearing it, Anne did not simply decorate herself. She asserted her influence in a court where visibility was power. Henry VIII's infatuation with Anne transformed her into the recipient of extraordinary luxury. To elevate her standing, Henry showered Anne with jewellery, commissioning pieces from Cornelis Hayes, a prominent goldsmith active in the 1530s. These gifts were calculated displays of royal intent, not just tokens of affection. Among them was the H.A. pendant, inscribed with Henry Amat Anne, Latin for Henry loves Anne. Through such jewels, Anne's claim to queenship was made visible, and her growing authority was broadcast across the court. The pearls and gold she wore were not just personal, they were declarations of her place among the most powerful women in England. Yet the same jewels that marked Anne's rise also marked her downfall. When she was arrested in 1536 on charges of adultery, treason, and incest, her jewellery, including the iconic bee necklace, was among the first possessions seized. The crown formally catalogued and repurposed her pearls and gold for the new queen. Most of Anne's jewels, likely including the bee pendant, were melted down or reset for Jane Seymour's use, erasing Anne's memory from courtly display. This process was not just practical. It sent a clear political message. By reclaiming and transforming Anne's adornments, the monarchy signalled that power had shifted, and that Anne's influence was to be systematically erased. No original bee pendant survives. Modern replicas are based solely on the portraits that captured Anne's brief, turbulent reign. The image endures, pearls framing the face of a queen whose ambition and fate are inseparable from the symbols she wore. The bee necklace, once a declaration of triumph, now stands as a reminder of how quickly favour could vanish in Henry's court. As the jewels passed into new hands, they carried with them the weight of loss and the hope for a different future. The next queen's story would unfold against the backdrop of a court forever altered by what came before. The Jewels of Jane and the Joust that broke a king. In January 1536 at Greenwich, the clatter of lances and the cheers of the court gave way to panic when Henry VIII was thrown from his horse and crushed beneath his armour. The accident left him unconscious for 2 hours. What began as a display of royal sport became a moment that would mark the beginning of a profound change in the king's body and mind. For Jane Seymour, the new queen-to-be, this incident shaped not only her brief tenure, but also the very meaning of the jewels she would wear. Jane's arrival at court was meant to restore order, a deliberate contrast to the turbulence that had ended Anne Boleyn's reign. Her image was one of modesty and virtue, and her jewels reflected this intention. Compared to the bold, ostentatious pieces favoured by Anne, Jane's adornments were restrained. The consort's necklace, a piece with 2 strands of pearls and rubies set in gold, was inherited from earlier queens and became a symbol of continuity and calm. Its dignified design matched Jane's role as a stabilising presence, a hope for renewal after years of upheaval. The consequences of Henry's fall, however, soon overshadowed these hopes. His leg injury never healed, leading to chronic pain and festering wounds. The trauma to his head is believed to have caused lasting psychological changes, making him more irritable and unpredictable. Jane's jewels, once meant to signal peace and a fresh start, took on a more fragile significance. They became emblems of a fleeting optimism, reminders of a king whose health and temperament were now in rapid decline. This decline was mirrored in Henry's appearance and possessions. His armour, once streamlined for tournaments, had to be custom-made to accommodate his expanding frame. The field armour of 1544, now in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, was crafted for a waist measuring nearly 50 inches and decorated with gold and gemstones, a reflection of both physical burden and the king's need for reassurance through display. Jane's life as queen was brief. After giving birth to Edward, she died, leaving behind the jewels that had symbolised stability and hope. The promise they carried outlasted her, their meaning transformed by loss. In a court defined by sudden reversals, Even the most carefully chosen jewels could not guarantee safety or lasting favor. As Henry's reign continued, the weight of expectation and fear found new expression in the gold and gems that surrounded him, setting the stage for a court where outward splendor masked a growing sense of dread. Terror in gold, paranoia, poison, and the queens who paid the price. Henry VIII's paranoia shaped every corner of his court, reaching into daily rituals and legislative acts alike. By the later years of his reign, his dread of poisoning had become a constant presence. After his leg ulcers turned foul, attendants were required to kiss his bedding every morning as part of the elaborate precautions designed to keep him safe. Food was tasted by several servants before it reached his table, and even his bath water was tested. No detail was too small. The king's fear demanded vigilance from all. This atmosphere of suspicion was not confined to private chambers. In 1531, following the Richard Roos incident, when a cook poisoned the Bishop of Rochester's household, claiming it was a joke, Henry's anxiety became law. The act for poisoning made willful murder by poison high treason, punishable by boiling to death. This draconian measure reflected the king's determination to root out threats and maintain control, and it set the tone for a court where danger lurked in every shadow and trust was a rare commodity. For Catherine Howard, Henry's fifth queen, the consequences of this environment were devastating. Thrust into court as a teenager, she wore jewels that marked her as the king's favourite. Among them was a pendant of ruby, emerald, and pearl, treasures passed down from earlier queens. Her headpieces bore the entwined initials K and H, tying her identity to both the king and the legacy of those who came before her. These gems were more than adornments. They were silent witnesses to the mounting expectations and risks that came with royal favour. Catherine's charm and youth briefly captivated the king, but the same web of surveillance and suspicion soon ensnared her. Her past relationships were used as evidence against her. When accusations of adultery surfaced, her jewels were among the first things confiscated, stripped away as her status collapsed. The cycle repeated. Jewels that once signalled privilege became markers of disgrace, ready to be refashioned for the next queen. In Henry's later years, the jewels he and his queens wore took on a new role. They became not just symbols of status, but enduring artifacts of a reign shaped by fear, suspicion, and the relentless need for control. Even as the court changed and queens came and went, these objects remained, untouched by the fates of those who wore them, awaiting the next chapter in a story that would end not with glory, but with something altogether more unsettling. Blood and dust, the exploding coffin, and the jewels that endured. Henry VIII's final days brought no triumph, only a grim spectacle that exposed the limits of royal power. On January 28, 1547, the king died after years of illness and decline, leaving behind a legacy marked by excess and brutality. His funeral procession began in Westminster, a grand cortege winding toward Windsor, meant to preserve the image of majesty and control even in death. Yet, the carefully constructed illusion unravelled in a single night. During an overnight stop at Sion Abbey, the lead-lined coffin containing Henry's remains failed under the pressure of decomposition. The hastily sealed casket, strained by the king's size and the gases from his decaying body, burst open. Remains spilled onto the cold stone floor, a stark and public undoing of the grandeur that had defined his reign. The scene was described with unsettling clarity by those present. Royal remains leaking from their enclosure. The spectacle of power reduced to something uncontrollable and grotesque. Whether the cause was the king's physical excess or the haste of his burial, the event shattered the illusion of invincibility that had surrounded him for decades. According to contemporary whispers, the macabre moment did not end there. Some accounts claim a stray dog entered the abbey and licked at the fluids pooling beneath the coffin. Whether fact or embellishment, this detail has lingered, a symbol of the king's fall from untouchable ruler to a figure undone by his own mortality. For many, it became a form of poetic justice, an image of a monarch whose cruelty and hunger for power ended in a spectacle of decay. Meanwhile, the crown jewels he so prized remained untouched, destined for display rather than decay. The gold, diamonds, and pearls that had once adorned Henry's body survived the chaos of his final hours. Preserved with care, these treasures outlasted not only the king, but the violence and upheaval of his reign. In museum cases and royal collections, they remain silent, immaculate, and unmarked by the fate that befell the man who wore them. Their continued existence offers more than a contrast to the king's ignoble end. These jewels endure as witnesses to the events and ambitions that shaped Henry's rule, holding stories that outshine even the most extravagant displays of power. Relics of a ruthless reign. What the jewels still tell us. Their continued presence in museums and collections invites us to see them not just as treasures, but as material witnesses to the turbulence and tragedy that defined Henry's reign. The story of Katherine of Aragon's heart-shaped pendant offers a vivid example. After Catherine's fall from grace, the pendant, engraved with the entwined initials H and K, vanished from court. It survived for centuries hidden in an English field, only resurfacing by chance in modern times. Its recovery gives the object a provenance as dramatic as the events it once symbolized. A marriage that began as a hopeful alliance and ended in betrayal. The pendant's pristine condition now stands in stark contrast to the fate of its original owner. A relic that outlasted the destruction of Catherine's life and position. Anne Boleyn's bee necklace, immortalized in her portraits, remains a powerful symbol of both her audacity and her downfall. The pearls and gold that once declared her queenly identity were likely repurposed after her execution, but the image of the necklace endures. Its legend highlights how objects can resist erasure, becoming vehicles for memory even when the original has vanished. Alongside this, Anne's story is preserved in other artifacts. Her prayer book, kept by the British Library, still bears Henry's handwritten love notes, a tangible link to the passion and intrigue that shaped her brief reign. These remnants carry the weight of her rise and fall. Their survival, a quiet defiance against the attempts to erase her legacy. The Royal Gold Cup, now in the British Museum, stands as another example. Its intricate designs and original pearls, matching the 1547 inventory, reinforce how some objects persist even as dynasties crumble. Such artifacts do more than showcase craftsmanship. They connect us to the personal and political stakes of the Tudor court, where jewels could signal favour one day and doom the next. What makes these relics compelling is their ability to bridge the gap between the personal ambitions of Henry and the broader sweep of history. They served as tools of power and markers of shifting alliances, their meaning shaped by both public spectacle and private turmoil. Today, their brilliance stands in sharp relief to the king's decline, offering a lasting perspective on the costs of absolute power. As we reflect on these enduring objects, we confront a simple truth. Even the mightiest rulers cannot escape the passage of time, and the stories their treasures tell are as much about downfall as they are about glory. Conclusion. Set against the backdrop of Henry VIII's turbulent court, these jewels offer more than mere decoration. They are mute witnesses to alliances forged and broken, ambitions realized and destroyed. Each artifact, whether Katherine of Aragon's heart-shaped pendant or Anne Boleyn's bee necklace, captures a distinct moment in the shifting fortunes of the Tudor dynasty. Their survival gives us a rare perspective on a reign marked by both splendor and paranoia. As these objects endure, they invite us to reflect on the meaning of legacy, how power may fade, but the stories embedded in these treasures continue to speak. For more detailed historical storytelling about royal jewels and the secrets they hold, subscribe to our channel. Even the brightest sparkle can conceal darkness.